This is me, and this is my camera. We have spent the last few years together, chasing just one thing: how to make simple moments feel cinematic. I used to believe filmmaking started with big setup, but over time I realized something important. It begins with your vision and the right tools. Because cinema is not just about shooting, it's about feeling. And so I began chasing that feeling, not with big budget, not with a team, just with a simple equipment and a question: can I turn ordinary life into cinematic? And today I want to show you exactly how I do it. It all starts with a story. No matter how good your camera is or how fancy your lights are, if you don't have a good story, you don't have a proper video. Story is the heart. And building a good story is actually simple than you think. Most of the time, my ideas come from real life, what I'm feeling, what I'm struggling with, what I'm curious about. For a long time, I made the mistake of thinking, what would people want to see? But the real magic started when I flipped the question, what do I want to tell? Because when you are honest with yourself, stories stop feeling forced. They start feeling real. Once the story feels right, it's time to translate it into visuals. This is where the shot list comes. My rule is simple. Start wide to show the world. Move closer to show the character. Get even closer to show the emotion. Every shot should feel like it's pulling the audience deeper into the story. For example, I start by experimenting with angles because the same moment can feel completely different depending on where the camera is placed. A low angle can add strength, and higher angle can quietly suggest vulnerability. Instead of collecting random shots, I think in sequences. I imagine how one frame will lead into the next, how movement will flow, and how the scene will breathe as a whole. Once the flow is clear, the next question is focus. Where should the eye go first? What deserves attention? And what should fade into the background? That decision is no longer about angles or composition. It becomes about light. Lighting is not about making things visible, but it is about deciding what should be visible. I experiment constantly. Hard light for contrast and tension. Soft light for intimacy and calm. Side light for depth, backlight for separation and mystery. There are another source too for lighting. Nature. Nature is the best source of lighting because it's unpredictable, and that is why I love it. But what most people do while shooting outside is directly into sun by raising shutter speed and break the rule of between shutter speed and frame rate, which doesn't look cinematic because motion blur is important. So what is solution? Instead of changing how the camera sees the motion, the better approach is to control how much light enters the lens. This is where ND filters stop being optional and start becoming essential. This is why I use Nisi and filter. They allow me to keep my shutter speed consistent with my frame rate, preserving natural motion blur even in harsh daylight. I don't have to sacrifice movement to protect exposure. There is no X pattern when adjusting exposure, and the image stays clean and usable across the entire range. Even when the weather surprises me, harsh sun at noon, drizzle, or moisture in the air, it doesn't slow the shoot down. Color accuracy matters to me because color is part of storytelling. Nisi's True Color technology keeps tones neutral with no color cast. And the consistency stays intact across all 1 to 5 stops. So exposure changes do not change the feeling of the image. With an adjustable range up to 4 stops, I get flexibility without sacrificing quality. I can shoot wide open, control motion blur, and keep the moment honest. The high-definition optical glass with nano coating protects the frame from real-world effects. Contrast stays clean. Details remain sharp. The filter does its job quietly. It simply removes the limitations that stop a shot from becoming cinematic. When the light is under control, the camera behaves naturally. And when the camera behaves naturally, the emotion stays intact. And that is why Nisi goes everywhere with me. A lot of people ask me what software I use, how I edit my videos, what my setup looks like, and how I color grade my films. My process is simple. Everything starts with music. Before I even touch the timeline, I spend time listening to different tracks. Music gives the film its direction. It sets the pace, the emotion, and the rhythm. Once the right track clicks, editing becomes less confusing. After that, I begin cutting. I place the clips, adjust their timing, and shape the flow of the scene. Once the structure feels right, I export the entire timeline into DaVinci Resolve. Since everything is shot in S-Log2, the first step is converting the footage to Rec 709. That creates a proper base to work from. In the second node, I balance exposure and contrast to keep the image natural. In the next node, I apply a film LUT because it adds cinematic response without destroying skin tones. It gives the image character while still leaving room for control. The remaining nodes are used for fine adjustments, contrast, color balance, and minor corrections. Because the footage is shot using an ND filter, the colors stay accurate, making this process much smoother. Once the grade is done, I bring everything back into Premiere Pro for final touches, minor corrections, subtitles, and small adjustments that help with clarity and flow. After that, it is a final export. And when you finally watch it back, that timeline full of cuts, those clips you struggled to capture, the frustration that made you want to quit for a moment, you will realize something. It was about believing that your story deserved a chance to breathe. That is what makes you a filmmaker. Because every imperfect video you complete is one step closer to the masterpiece you will create tomorrow.